Hi there, I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. I am here at ISMG Studio at the Gartner Security and Risk Management Summit. The topic of conversation is malware defense, evening the fight. I am delighted to welcome back to the studio Robin Dass. You know him as the Executive Director, Market Growth Strategist in Business Development with DataBee, a Comcast NBC Universal company. You got a long business card.
I do. You see it. It's this long.
Robin, it's very good to see you again.
It's great to see you again, Tom.
So dive right into the topic. What are some of the malware trends that you're watching as we sit here midway through the year? And why are they so concerning to you?
Well, we'd be remiss if we weren't at a show like this and the first thing out of our mouths wasn't AI and ML, right? And so that is the biggest trend that we're seeing and will continue to be the biggest trend. It's just the bad guys now have AI, ML. They're using this to kind of generate their malware at an unprecedented scale and speed.
So it's not just good phishing messages anymore.
No, I mean, they're just able to expand the types of attacks and just the types of bad things that are going to be sent through at scale.
So given what they're doing, where do you see the biggest gaps in traditional malware defenses?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a great question. So the biggest gap, I think, with traditional malware detections is signature-based. So what do we mean by that? Somebody first has to find that it's a bad piece of malware, right? So they have to detonate it in the sandbox. And so they've detonated the malware and then they need to add it to a big list. You need to then, as the owner of the defenses, download that list and have this list of potential malware. Obviously, we talked about AI. The traditional defenses are overwhelmed because the malware is now coming at them at such a speed and velocity that these list-based methods just don't work.
So it's a speed and scale. It just can't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's just an unsustainable way of just kind of trying to deal with the problem.
Now, no surprise, Comcast has been a big defender for many years. Talk about BluVector, the AI-powered NDR, and how this is taking it to a new level of defense.
Yeah, I mean, so what we're trying to do is just level the playing field. The bad guys have AI, so let's give the good guys AI. So BluVector is this patented machine learning technology that has AI in it. We use traditional signature-based, but then we also supplement it with the AI-based, so it can kind of catch the unknown malware before it even happens. And so by having the AI to kind of identify suspicious pieces of malware in advance, we can just catch it at a much earlier stage.
Does this truly help even the playing field?
I really believe, it does.
So BluVector helps customers get greater visibility, defense across the network. How does this feed the data fabric that DataBee manages?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, we're able to look at more than just the malware coming in from a north-south perspective. We're actually able to look at traffic across your network from an east-west perspective. So it leverages Zeek sensors to define and find the malware. And so as it's able to look at traffic across your network, that makes life really interesting. If you think about network segmentation, you might not want to prevent traffic going from segment A and segment B internally in your network, but you just want to inspect it and know what's kind of happening.
So I'm fascinated by the data fabric. You and I have talked about it in the past. How can this be leveraged across the enterprise?
Yeah, so the whole point is in conjunction with something like a BluVector, going back to this idea of looking at east-west traffic. So I'm looking at traffic across the network, but then, I see device A in network talking to this other device. What would be great to know would be the context around that device. Who owns that device? What does that device do? The person that owns it, what are their contact info? So you, as sort of the network manager, can look at the owner of that application or device and say, hey, you're speaking to this. Should this be happening? Should this not be happening?
Okay, examples. Talk to me about BluVector. Talk to me about DataBee.
Yeah.
You've got some high-profile examples in the public and private sectors.
Yeah, so we have some three-letter agencies that we're unable to talk about. So in sort of the government sector, but we just put out a press release actually with Jesse Whaley, the CISO from Amtrak, sort of saying a lot of nice things about their deployment of BluVector. Because what you can do with BluVector, first of all, from a compliance perspective, again, going back to this idea of should these different devices be talking to each other? So you can look at it from a compliance perspective, are the devices configured properly? And this now gives you insight into knowing if they're configured properly. The other thing that's really interesting is, the pendulum, I think, has shifted. So EDR is obviously a fundamentally important technology, but there are blind spots. There are places where EDR isn't deployed or EDR just can't be deployed. And so by having the network, it sort of balances out that full picture. And so that gets really, really exciting when you think about more legacy devices that maybe can't even have EDR deployed on them. So if you think about that OT convergence, any legacy infrastructure, that's another area that, say, Amtrak, for example, has been using BluVector is to kind of give it some insight into the OT networks and the traffic flows there, which, as we all know, when you think about security threats can come anywhere, and like what's a great place to come from is like those unprotected, like sort of or less visible parts of your network. And so that's where we really see sort of a BluVector plus DataBee really driving some significant advantage.
Well, Robin, as we're sitting here, it's almost midway through the year, believe it or not. What are the adversarial trends that you're focused on now that maybe BluVector and DataBee and us need to be next as we go on?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the adversarial trends is, I think traditionally, it's about finding the next sort of chink in the armor or the next sort of weak point. And for that, I think really for us, it's that OT legacy networks. As these things become more and more connected, we think about IoT and like you start to try and light up these sort of older legacy parts of your network. I think that's where the attacks are going to come, and that's why it really is important that you have visibility into what's kind of going on to there. The other key trend, I think, is again, like as we sort of try and think about segmentation, micro-segmentation, zero trust, like understanding, the traffic that goes from internally your network, point A to point Z, like, is that allowable and what's really going on behind there? And that's where things like Zeek give you that much more nuanced view of the data versus something like a NetFlow.
This is not our last conversation.
Hey, Wolfie.
Robin, pleasure to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to see you as always, Tom. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Again, we're talking with Robin Das with DataBee for Information Security Media Group. I'm Tom Field. Thank you for giving us your time and attention.